the first WrestleMania where your champion is WrestleMania 9 in Caesar's Palace. They've got the Vestal Virgins. They've got Macho Man getting fed grapes by women in robes. Lucky him. And they have you and Yokozuna. Yokozuna's won the Royal Rumble. It was the first year where the Rumble winner would get the shot at WrestleMania. And then you guys have this match. And at the end of it, Fuji throws the salt in your eyes. Yokozuna beats you. And then Hogan comes out and you tell Hogan to go and beat Yokozuna for you.
Please don't make me suffer anymore. I'll just say this. When I won the title, it's like you don't have these delusions about being the champion and stuff. But when they put the title on me, Vince McMahon said, "This is not a short-term thing. This is a long-term thing. We're going to make you a champion like we did with Bob Backlund or some of these other. We're going back. We're going to be champion for maybe 7 or 8, 9 years, or we're going to put the belt on you for a long time, so you don't have to worry about anything." So I didn't worry about anything. I thought I was in power for a long time. And even when Hulk Hogan came back in to the territory, I can remember I used to be good friends with Hulk Hogan at that time. I was always friends with him. In fact, the last time I saw him, was when I was at WrestleMania with Piper. I had done a big collage cartoon of all the wrestlers. I drew every wrestler that ever worked in the company on a big collage, and I had everybody sign it. And I handed it to Hogan, gave it to him, and he was pretty choked when he got it, and was pretty, I would that day I would have said Hulk Hogan was one of my good friends, and I had a lot of respect for him. And when he came in, I remember it was like I would have almost walked up to Hulk and said, "Here, that you can have the belt back." I would have had no problem being second fiddle to Hulk Hogan. But I remember the first day I was in a town called Florence, South Carolina, and the first time I saw Hulk Hogan since I won the title. And I remember thinking, Hulk Hogan was always my friend, and was always a fan of my work. He told me his dad was the biggest Hart Foundation fan, and that of all people, his dad loved the Hart Foundation. I always thought Hulk was one of my good friends. When I first started wrestling, I worked with Hulk a lot, and I taught him a lot and helped him when he first started. And when he became a big star, I always thought we were pretty good friends. But the day when I won the title, I guess I was no longer Hulk's friend anymore. Because I remember the first time I saw him, I went up to say hi to him, walked down the ramp going into the building, and he was standing against the wall talking to Brutus Beefcake. And I walked up to him. I said, "Hey, Terry," I came up to shake his hand, and he had his arms crossed like this, and he wouldn't even take my hand. He wouldn't shake my hand. I remember just looking at me and sort of nodding and talking to Beefcake. And so I remember just standing there like this with my hand out for about 20 seconds, and I just walked away, and I was like, "F him," Yeah, so,
I want to ask you this: why do you think that he did that?
I think he thought he was the big dog and the king dog in the company, and anybody else, I don't think anybody. I think he had problems with Macho Man or Warrior or whoever else. He was a guy that thought he was everything in wrestling, and that everyone else we were all backup players to Hulk Hogan, and that's the way he saw it. And once that belt was on me, I became the enemy or somebody that had to be removed. And I didn't. I still talk to Vince, and Vince is like, "No, nothing's changing. No change of plans. Hogan's got nothing to do with you. He's going to be in tag teams with Beefcake and I don't know who, the Money Inc. or something he was wrestling, and he goes, he's just promoting a movie. He's got nothing to do with anything." And so I kept believing that. And then when I showed up in Las Vegas for WrestleMania, the first thing I get is a message to come talk to Vince. And that was the night before. And it was just almost like I thought it was a joke. Like he goes, "We're taking the belt off you." And I was like, I remember like just sort of like my eyes burning, beams, like light beams through Vince McMahon. But he laid it all out to me, and I thought it sucked. I thought it was the worst. Regardless of whether it was me in there, I thought that is the finish, and that the fans are gonna barf when they see that. And I think, I'm probably pretty close to the truth. It was. I think what really was going on is that Hogan was putting a lot of pressure on Vince to take the belt and take it off me and put it on him. Otherwise, he was going to go to WCW. So I think it was our last. Vince just pulled the plug on me, like everything he said, everything he promised me and said to me didn't matter. Just unplugged that and put in Hulk Hogan again. And I remember so many things about that night. I remember Hulk Hogan telling me that he goes, I want to thank you so much. And she was like suddenly my friend again. Suddenly we're talking, which I wasn't very talkative if you knew me. But he was back to being my buddy again now that he was getting the belt. And I remember he said to me in the dressing room, he goes, I'll be happy to return the favor. And I remember I stopped and I looked right at him and I said, I'm going to hold you to that. And anyway, the truth is, after that, after I lost the belt to Hogan, my popularity or my crowd, sort of my popularity with the company never diminished at all. I was still basically the star of the company, but Hogan was the champion. And I know he did a tour right away. They did a tour over here in England and Europe, all over, and I don't think it did as well. And they were starting to have second thoughts about Hogan, I think Vince was. And all I know is that I could feel it. Like sometimes you get like a instinct. I said, I'm probably going to win the belt back. I remember thinking about it. I said, the main event has to be SummerSlam, has to be Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan. It's going to be the biggest match. Of all the wrestlers we got in the company, that's the two guys. That's the one everyone wants to see, Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan. So I could feel it. And then Vince had called me and said, because I was still over with or without the belt, which was a surprise to me because I thought my time had come, and that I actually thought I failed maybe as champion and didn't do a good enough job for some reason.
You famously said in your book that you guys filmed a promo shot of you and Hogan with the belt, which obviously has never come to light. But like, why do you think he would go as far as to shoot that promo shot with you and tell you, yeah, we're gonna do it, and then like why did he drop it to Yokozuna and not you? What would have made a difference to him?
I don't know. I think what it was to stop him from going to WCW. But what Hogan's motives were, I don't know. I mean, I just know that when Vince had called me and said, you're going to win the King of the Ring, the first one, and we're going to, somewhere in that conversation, this is before the King of the Ring, he said, I remember he called me up I was at home in my day off, and I was in my kitchen, and he called my house. Vince was all friendly, and I remember I answered the phone, and he goes, we're going to put the belt back on you. And I was like, I remember giving my wife at the time the thumbs up, like this is the news I've been waiting for, I kind of thought that something was going to happen. He goes, I'm putting you and Hogan together at SummerSlam. You're going to beat him right in the middle of the ring with a sharpshooter. And I'm telling him, like, to my wife, I'm like, holy like and so I was really happy. Like I was like trying to be calm, like, great. And he goes, there's only one problem. He goes, I haven't talked to Hulk about it yet. But he goes, shouldn't be any problem, but I'll be talking to him in the next day or so, and so don't say anything, keep it under your hat kind of thing. And so I hang up the phone. This is about 4 days before the King of the Ring. And we went on the road, and I called him from the road. I called Vince every day, and he goes, basically that Hogan's not buying it, doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to put you over, and is not agree, won't agree to do the finish. He's refusing to put you over. And then I remember Vince telling me almost like he's trying to piss me off. He said, Hogan says you're not in his league and that that you could never work with him. So I remember I was like, he said, but don't say anything. I got a couple more days to work on him, and I think I can talk him into it for Sunday. So I go to the pay-per-view on Sunday, and I'm pissed off. I'm so mad. I can't believe that Hulk Hogan would do this to me. Like, I was a guy that always thought of him as a friend and vice versa. And I know I worked really hard to finally climb up that ladder to get to that spot. I worked so hard. And here he was, stopping me from getting my proper push. And anyway, that day in the dressing room in Dayton, where I won the King of the Ring, I remember I got there and they said, basically, it's no change. Hogan refuses to work with you. Says you're not in his league, and so we're putting you with Jerry Lawler at King of the Ring or SummerSlam. And I was like, what's that supposed to be? Like, there's no money in that match. First of all, when you're a world champion, in those days, I don't know about anymore, but in those days, when you were the champion, you had the belt, you were the highest paid wrestler on the card, period. And so, I was just starting getting used to some pretty good, serious money that I was making at the time. And it was a big blow for me to have Hulk Hogan refuse. And so when Vince told me that all that night in the dressing room that Hulk didn't want to refuse to put you over, and so we're going to have to change it. We're putting you with Jerry Lawler now. I was so mad. I thought, who is Hulk Hogan to dump my career out the back, just to over my career like it's nothing. And so I remember thinking I should just go in and confront him straight up, face to face. But I thought, well, I better not do it in the first match, because if we get into a fight and he can't wrestle or something, or I beat the crap out of him, or I was mad enough, and I was really, really mad and pretty fired up and ready to do whatever was necessary. But I thought I better not do it before his match, because he's got to go in and wrestle. And at the time, I thought, it's not Yokozuna's fault. He's going to get the belt. He's going to be the new champion, all because of Hulk refusing to do this for me. Suddenly, he's going to get all the top money. He'll be main event, be the world champion for 6 months till SummerSlam. Anyway, that's all the money that should have gone to me, but it's going to him. So it's not fair for me to, hold that against him or screw up something for him. So my thinking was, don't say anything till after his match. Let him have the match, let the belt change hands like it's supposed to, and then just go in and let him know what you think of him. And so that's what happened. He had his match. He dropped the belt to Yokozuna, which, if you remember that match with Yokozuna and Hulk Hogan, that might conceivably be the worst finish in all wrestling history. But so then I went back to the dressing room. Like before, I had wrestled Scott Hall already, and I'd wrestled Mr. Perfect already. And I was getting ready for the main event to wrestle Bam Bam. So I already wrestled 2 really hard matches. The last thing I want to do was go and fight Hulk Hogan in another dressing room. But I had something I wanted to say to him. And I remember I went in the dressing room and I said, I heard you said I wasn't good enough to work with you. And he goes, I never said that. I said, and I repeated all the things that Vince said to me. And I remember it got pretty testy, and Hogan kept saying, that's not how it happened. That's not what's going on. You don't got the whole story. And I said, well, tell me the whole story. I'm right here. And then he basically is like, well, I can't tell you. And I said, well, anyway, I called him out. You can read it in my book. But I called him out, and he just stood there. Like he didn't accept my challenge anyway. And I told him he was full of shit. and I told me he was a piece of shit, and that he would never be in my league, and I walked out of the dressing room. And then he came up the next day telling me that it was a misunderstanding, that Vince had misunderstood. They blamed it all on Vince, that it was a misunderstanding, which I remember going, I don't know what a misunderstanding, because we took a picture, we had taken a picture in I think it was in Halifax, Nova Scotia for a TV taping, and they had me and Hulk Hogan posing with the belt. It's the same pose, the same exact thing that I did with Kevin Nash for a wrestling magazine cover, where Kevin was about 8 feet tall. I think he even had him standing on a couple of boxes or something to make it look even more, obvious, like he's so much bigger than me. But that's what I did with Hogan. We did a photo shoot with the belt, where he's got it and I got it. We're both gripping, and we're like face to face, like that way. And so then the next day, after I told Hogan off in the dressing room, he must have gone crying to Vince and said, "Hey, I look really bad now," and blah 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 blah. And all the wrestlers were on my side. I remember Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and Nasty Boys and everybody were on my side. They're all pissed that they took the belt off me, and Undertaker too. I was. If you'd had a vote in the dressing room, they would have voted the belt back on me, which is saying a lot, because Hogan was pretty popular with the wrestlers, but they just thought it was a real thing to happen. But Vince and Hogan seemed to try to get their story right the overnight. And so I walked in the next day. Hogan says, "I'm going to take you to Vince. We're going to talk this whole thing out." And they put me to Vince. And then they concocted this whole story about how it was never going to be a title match, and that Hogan didn't want to put me over because it was a title match, or it wasn't a title match. If it had been a title match, apparently he would have put me over. But he said Vince told him that it was a non-title match, which I knew was because we did the picture. And then Vince goes, "Yeah, we were never putting the belt. It was never going to be for the title. It was you and Hogan in a non-title match." And I'm like, "Why would we even do that? Like, what are we even fighting for?" And he goes, "That's just the way we had it anyway." So Vince, they made up this story the night before, and the next day was supposed to appease me. I remember I stood up and I said, I called them both out. I said, "Look, I know what I was told. I know what you told me on the phone. You told me I was winning the belt at SummerSlam. I didn't dream that phone conversation. You're the one that told me that." And then I told Hogan, things that he promised me. And I said, "I don't know which one of you is lying, but one of you is lying, and I know it's not me." And I walked out of the room. That was my dealing with both of them at that time. And then Hogan left the company a few weeks later, and it was like he went to WCW. And I think that's what was really at play. I think Hogan was negotiating with Vince, and Vince was scared to lose him to WCW. And then after he realized that he wasn't really even drawing anymore, he wanted to switch back. But by then they switched Yoko in, and they'd moved me out. And so I think, like, what should have been my run for 92, 93, 94, all those should have been my years. I had to share those years with Yoko and different guys, but I think I was still the star of the company.